Welcome to High Strangeness, where we ask questions and explore all that is strange and unexpected in our reality.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I just wanted to give you a heads up that today's episode is a moderately strange episode. Moderately strange or minimally simply because it's about a sport that not many people know about. So today I'm excited to have an episode to talk about arm wrestling. I think there's a lot of people out there that enjoy it and like it but don't know too much about it, and there's some people that don't know anything about it. Today I have an interviewee on the show, Jeff Kirby. He is a well-established arm wrestler and is going to share some of his experiences and what he's gone through up to this point. He's the founder and team captain of Southern Utah Arm Wrestling. He has been arm wrestling since 2001, and he's had many accomplishments like world champion and runner-ups, American Arm Warriors United States champion, 6-time state champion, 3-time medalist in the national championships, a qualifier for Team USA, and a PAL, American Arm Fighter Utah State champion in 2 different divisions. So he's heavily involved in arm wrestling here in Utah and even nationally. And so what better can there be to talk to somebody like this and just learn a little bit about arm wrestling? So that's what our episode will be today. Listen in and enjoy it. Jeff's a great guy. Thanks. Welcome to High Strangeness. I'm Tony, and this is the place where we talk about all things strange and unexpected in our reality. Today, we're not going to talk about anything strange at all, really. It's just something I truly enjoy, and I hope the rest of you can hear and learn a little bit about, and that is the world of arm wrestling. I think it's an amazing sport. I've loved it ever since I was a young man in junior high, and I've even followed it over the years. And so I thought to myself, hey, I want to do a fun episode here about something that I truly enjoy, and what could be better than just chatting about arm wrestling. So I have a great guest here today on the show, and then he's been in this sport for years, and his name is Jeff Kirby. Now, if you don't know much about arm wrestling, stick around. Learn a little bit about it and understand about what this great sport is that so many people are doing across the country and the world. So you might even want to give it a try, and you're going to walk away from this episode with some good information that will, at the very least, teach you about the sport and what people do in this sport. So with all of that, I want to say and welcome my guest today, Jeff Kirby. Jeff, how are you doing, my friend?
Hi, Tony. How are you? Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, especially for the sport of arm wrestling.
Yes.
Any attention it gets is always good.
I agree. I really do think it's one of the most, it's one of my favorite sports, and I still follow it. So I want to ask, how are you doing in life in general? Is things going good as we are now taping right before Christmas?
Right.
Things going good for you guys?
Things are going pretty good. I am a single dad and been running around crazy for Christmas, getting things ready. But I think I'm ready. I think I'm finished. So
perfect. Well, I hope you have a great Christmas, and your family as well. So you are now living in southern Utah. Is that correct?
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about you. Have you always lived in Utah, or what brought you to Utah?
No, originally I grew up in Upper Michigan, and like I was telling you, I've been involved in sports like hockey and wrestling and even a little baseball. And I kind of moved around a lot earlier in life. At 16, I moved to Phoenix and then to Vegas and spent 16 years in Vegas and got a job offer in Southern Utah, little town of Laverkin. And so I moved my family here, at that point. And that was probably, I want to say 13, 14 years ago. So I've been in Southern Utah for quite some time.
That's pretty cool. Do you like Southern Utah?
Yeah, I do like it. I think it's great, for kids, low crime. It's warm, sometimes a little warm in the summer, but nothing like Phoenix or Vegas. It's quite a bit cooler. So Yeah, I like it here. I do.
Well, it's funny because I moved out here to go to college, and once I got here and experienced Utah, I was like, I'm done. I'm here.
Right.
My East Coast roots stayed back east, and I decided I'm just gonna live here. So it was great. Great place to raise a family too, by the
Yeah,
way.
absolutely.
So I've always loved arm wrestling. And I did it a number of years back before an injury, and so I've always had a real love for the sport and have watched its progression over the years. Now things have changed a lot since when I used to do it, and maybe we'll get into some of those things. But you have been in this sport for quite some time. I want to know what drew you to this sport. Which, by the way, let me say this before you get going. Jeff has got he's a very different type of arm wrestler, and we're going to get into it today. And when I first reached out to talk to Jeff, I didn't even realize this, but he is a gentleman with one arm, and so we're going to talk about how he's used those experiences, a little bit more differently than some people would. But it made it easy for you to choose which arm you wanted to use to arm wrestle, I bet, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So what drew you to the sport, Jeff? What drew you to it?
Well, growing up, I was athletic. I played hockey, I wrestled, like I said, some baseball. Really, my first, I would arm wrestle with my older brother. And at that time, we were just kids, maybe fourth grade or something. And, we were even back then. But a little bit later, a few years later, the movie Over the Top came out. And this is a
Love that
story for
movie.
a lot of people. And I was in junior high at the time, and I watched it, and I was like, "Wow, I want to do that." So, and a bunch of the other my classmates, schoolmates watched it as well. So we would meet in the morning before school on these big steps, and we would arm wrestle there. And at that point, I realized I was definitely the top. I could beat everybody. Me and another guy were very, very close.
Yeah.
But I realized, even though my weight was probably, or I know it was lighter than some of the other kids, but, I could stop him and beat him. And I thought I knew technique then by watching the movie. And because there is some technique in that
Yes.
movie, they brought in, greats like John Brzenk to help Sylvester Stallone with techniques and things like that. Alan Fisher as well. But so that was something, I decided I want to do, but that was prior to internet or anything like that. So, it didn't
Yes.
happen at that time. Besides, it's just arm wrestling for fun, like a lot of people do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I do remember Over the Top. Wow, I loved that film so much.
Yeah, and I still have it.
It was a fun one. It was fun, wasn't it? And because I'm a Philly guy, Rocky Balboa, Sylvester Stallone, close to
Right.
my heart all my life. And to see him out there pulling, I was like, go for it, man.
Right. Yeah. And
Go ahead.
I
Sorry.
was going to say, and a lot of people think the movie's, kind of cheesy and very 80s, but it's one of my all-time favorite. And I know I'm not unique in that now that
Yeah.
I've,
Yeah.
been in the world of arm wrestling for so many years. So many people watch that, and it really made the sport take off around the world. Um,
Yeah.
you know, uh, Not to get off track here, but having Sylvester Stallone in it, it was supposed to make it take off in the U.S. too, and it's interesting because other countries really adapted it at that point, and never really became that popular here in the United States, to where other countries, Ukraine, Japan, Russia, they all get money from their government to arm wrestle. But then you have
Crazy.
our country, which really it originated in as far as an organized sport. 1954, I think it was in Petaluma, California, and you've probably heard of the Petaluma days. I mean, you go back quite a ways, and and it was like ABC's highest rated segment, so people were watching it, and then it just kind of fizzled. It never really took off here. And then I would see these organizations, big organizations, pop up, and everybody's like, it's going to be in the Olympics or it's going to be huge now. and then they would just fizzle. And
Right.
so it's really been stuck in America. It
Yeah.
really
Yeah, it has.
is not the sport it should be with the amount of dedication, technique put into it. Because a lot of us, it's been our life. It's been our life.
Yeah.
So we will dedicate, I don't want to say everything, but nearly everything into it. And financially, really, there's not much of a payout. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
to
right.
do with the love of the sport is what it is.
It is. Yeah. But it's wonderful. It's the purest, I mean, just to lock arms with somebody, boom, Anyway, for people out there, I used to do it a lot up till I got an injury in the 1980s. So when I talk like, oh, I've done it, I have done it, but it's not been for a while. So I love talking about it and seeing the sport as it's progressed. So before we get into anything else, Jeff, just for the benefit of the audience out there, can you describe arm wrestling for people? Because I mean, everybody's going to have their own thought of what they think this is. But how would you describe arm wrestling, both at the most amateur level and then as you move up into these competitions and things like that?
Right. It's a chess match, but it's a very fast chess match. You have three elements: speed, strength, and skill. And where most people think, okay, the strongest man will win. And I have to say, I've won most of my matches by combining speed and skill. They're usually over within 3 seconds, probably.
Wow.
Real fast, ready, go, done. I believe they say the average arm wrestling match lasts like 10 seconds. So it's a very fast sport. And I'd say you have to think fast, but what it comes down to is you practice it over and over and over again because really you don't have the time to think. You just have the time to react, and when it's there and you automatically react, that's when you're successful. And
Yeah.
it takes a ton of dedication. But you said like the amateur level, some people will do it for fun, but how it works is you have people like me usually that arm wrestled in school and think they're the best in the world. They're going to conquer the world. And they would come to practice and they'd say, I've never been beaten before. And they would always get a, well, sorry, you're about to lose. It's just the way it
That's right.
is.
Yeah.
Because they don't, have that experience in arm wrestling. And even as far as the strength goes, we'll arm wrestle, 1 to 2 hours, usually once a week, but you're going from sport 0 to 90, and it shocks all your tendons, everything. They even say your bones get harder from arm wrestling because you have
Yeah.
micro fractures. And,
Yeah.
so when you've been doing it a long time, you don't really worry about an arm break, because your bones are harder. But you were talking about injuries. You go through many, many injuries. I
Yep.
don't know. The body's made to go from, like I said, zero to 120 like that, and
Right.
you do get injuries. Thank God for me, I haven't had any serious injuries. When I say that, I mean detached tendons or arm breaks. I've been hurt a lot of times,
Yeah.
and that kind of made me better though. I used to hook, like you were talking, and
Hmm.
I got injured in a tournament, and so I couldn't hook anymore. So I started top rolling, which is a defensive move, and
Right.
realized I was better that way. So it was like, and the only reason I didn't hook is because it hurt too much to hook.
Right. Right.
And if
Well,
you,
that's funny. I was going to say that's funny because so I was a hooker, an inside arm wrestler, and with the injury, I was a young guy and didn't have a team to train with, right? So it was like I wish I had somebody to tell me, hey, focus on, top rolling and posting and stuff like that. And
right,
maybe I would have been able to stick to it for a bit because then I could have built that side of my arm wrestling. So yeah, and I think it's an amazing difference between the different types of arm wrestling as well. So you did you become and stay a top roller?
I still do it to this day. I when new people come in, I explain it to them like this. A hook is an inside move. It's a strength move.
Yeah.
So I grew up, my family watching boxing, and it was a big thing in our family. And so your guys that hook are more like your Mike Tysons, your inside guys, your strength guys, and the guys that top roll is they're more like a Muhammad Ali, where you're being defensive, and
Yeah.
but I don't really tell people one is better than the other, because some people seem very gifted in a hook and some in a top roll. But I will have them grab onto a move and perfect that and work it, and then on to other things, because I can hook as well. That
Yeah.
injury was
Yeah.
10 years ago, so I can hook as well. But I know I can finish a person a lot faster in a high handed top roll, because you have the two different styles. People call them moves, but they're really styles, because then you have moves within the styles. With the hook, you
Right.
can shoulder press, you can drag. You have moves within those styles. So I don't recommend that anybody find a style and just stick to that forever. That might be their best thing, but you want to
Yeah.
practice other things as well. And that's where you do that, is in practice rather than on the table. Because if you're going up to that table and you're unsure of what you're going to do, the match is over. And that's how it
Right.
works. So
Right.
you want to go up there knowing what you're going to do and be able to adjust if it's not going your way or the way you want it to.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely going to revisit technique, training, and those sorts of things in this conversation. Thank you for sharing a little bit about just the sport, what it is, and that sort of thing. And it's funny to me because I kind of remember this vaguely because it was so long ago. But there was a time way, way back where there was seated arm wrestling too. Do you remember that?
As far as yeah, they still have, as far as I know, one tournament a year, which is a national tournament. I can't remember where it's at, but I'll see it, online or on Facebook. So they still do have a sit down tournament, they call
Wow.
it. Yeah, and I've never done one before. Uh,
Yeah, that's interesting.
and I guess they
Yeah,
sit
I
down
remember it.
and they'll strap themselves to the chair. I know that, and I I do, from what I've heard, that they rely a little less on technique and more on
Mhm.
strength when
Right.
they're doing it, that way. But I've never
Yeah.
competed in a sit down tournament before.
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember back in the 80s, I almost purchased a seated table for it. And I
Really?
remember that was, yeah, it was pretty cool. Okay. Different organizations out there. Can you talk about that? Because there's definitely some organizations internationally. And as people look into arm wrestling, they'll see some of the big competitions and some of the Europe organizations and stuff. But here in the United States, some people might recall WAL, a few years ago, and they're not doing it right now for some reason. But what other organizations are you aware of here in the United States?
Well, in the United States, actually, there's a lot of smaller organizations, state organizations, things like that. You mentioned Wall. Well, Wall came in and they were a big deal and they were well advertised and they were offering money. So you had a lot of people who never arm wrestled before jumping into these tournaments. And you see an arm break maybe once every, I mean, 6, 7, 8 years. It's not that common. But I went to
Yeah.
a Wall tournament and I didn't compete in it. I was coaching, actually, my ex wife, competing in it. And I swear I saw 6 arm breaks in a matter of an hour. It's just
Oh my.
so many injuries. I almost pulled her out of it because it was like,
Yeah.
and then there's some theories on that. They changed the pad size. Your setup, your start is different. With that pad size, you can get out in a dangerous position. And a lot of it was a lot of new people going against pros. And,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
didn't know what to expect. But, before that, you had the UAL, and it was like, okay, now it's going to take off. It's going to be huge, and the UAL still does exist. It's just not quite what it was at one time. And then, they were contracting athletes, and arm wrestlers were so desperate to be something, And
Yeah.
I remember a woman coming over, and she's like, "I'm a contracted athlete," and I was like, "Oh, really? What are you getting paid? How?" Well, nothing. So you just signed your career over to organization with no payment or anything. All that says is you can't arm wrestle for any other organization. Well, then Wall
Right.
came around and they were so big to where the UAL started releasing the contracts because they weren't doing as much. And then COVID hit with Wall because Wall did some huge matches and some huge tournaments. And COVID came and they kind of stopped. It was what I thought was just for temporarily, and you haven't seen it again since. But since
Yeah.
then, you have East versus West, King of the Table. Uh, Michael Todd does the Monster Factory Arm Wrestling, which are big organizations. I know we were talking about more small local U.S. organizations, but those are bigger world organizations. As far as smaller organizations, there used to be Northeast Arm Wrestling Board. I don't even know if it exists. It was a website, and you could find all the tournaments in the U.S. on that website. Well, everything's
Hmm.
kind of gone to Facebook. I don't like it as much because it's scattered. Um,
Yeah.
Here in Utah, it's interesting. When I moved to Utah, arm wrestling didn't exist.
Right.
And Utah is really the biggest arm wrestling state in the United States. You have John Brzenk, who's known as the greatest of all time. You have Bob Brown up north, Robert Baxter, who's a part of East versus West, and huge. But I moved down here, and there wasn't anything. And I
Yeah.
started in 2001, so I started a bit later than you did, but it's been some time now. I mean, we're almost in 2025, but I started back then, and then I took a break, um, from arm wrestling because life started, and some bad things happened in my life. I got addicted to drugs, things like that, and quit arm wrestling. I don't know if you want me to go into detail about that, but I was actually homeless in Las Vegas for a year. I lived on the streets,
Oh
and
wow.
yeah, so a lot of people say I should write a book, but writing's not my favorite thing. But yeah, I lived homeless for a year in Vegas, and
Wow.
that's really, I became a Christian at that moment, a believer in God, and I'm not really into
Yeah.
religion, but I do have a strong faith in Christ and God because that's what got me off the street. But I got married and started having some more kids, and I was just sitting down on the computer, because I only did it a few years and then took that break. And I was looking just at arm wrestling stuff, kind of like you do. You sit and just start looking at it. And
Yeah.
my wife at the time said, "Well, why don't you start doing it again?" And so I decided, okay, yeah, I'll do a local tournament. And it's interesting. It was the Utah Summer Games had a local tournament, and me and my stepson arm wrestled in it. Did well. I didn't take first, not like I wanted to, but I was
Mhm.
just getting back into training and stuff, and knew that I would dominate it soon enough. And went to do it the next year. And this is how I really got involved in promoting, because I went to do it the next year and they canceled it out. So I sent them
Mhm.
an email. I was angry. I'm like, this is, after, the year, and then even my wife got into it. So it might have been 2 years later, but I wrote an
Yeah.
email and said, how could you cancel arm wrestling out of this? This is our family sport. You have to
Yeah.
do it. At that point, they sent me an email back and wanted to have a meeting with me. And they're asking, do you know anybody who would run it? And I'm like, well, thinking maybe this guy, maybe this guy. It's definitely not my thing. And that's
Yeah.
what they cornered me. And how about you? I guess they like the drive and the drive. That's what they said in the compassion for the sport. They saw that.
Yeah.
And so I decided to do it and have been running it.
And
Oh, I
so
forget what we're
an
on.
organizer,
The
an
other,
organizer was born.
right. And so I've been doing that one, and we call it the Utah Summer Games State Championship. I've been doing it. I think we're coming up on our 13th or 14th year. It's on the poster. Uh, so we've been doing that one. And then a guy named Dallin Rogers up in Salt Lake started an organization called FitCon, fitness convention.
Hmm.
And it's one of the biggest ones in the United States. And he found me on the internet and asked if I would run arm wrestling, up there for him. And so sure enough, I started running that one, and I liked it because he stayed out of it. He's like, "You do your thing," and So, and
That's
that
great.
right now, that is a pretty popular tournament. It's a lot of fun. I get a lot of sponsors. So the arm wrestlers um, get recognized in a way where they get prizes, and and that's what I've had the arm wrestlers tell me is, yeah, we love all the prizes. It makes it fun for them. And and I've been doing that one. I'm guessing at this point, but I would say 8 years, probably
Wow.
seven to
That's
nine
great.
years, something like that. And I've ran other tournaments. I've ran uh, PAL USA Professional Arm Wrestling League qualifier. That was another one that came up that I was hopeful about and then disappeared. But that one, and I have participated in running wall tournaments. W World Arm Wrestling League, and so I've just ran a ton of a lot of tournaments over the years, but the summer games and FitCon are the ones that have stayed with me every year. And
Yeah.
I'm getting older and all that, and I wonder, do I want to keep running tournaments? And I mentioned that to my 11-year-old daughter, and yeah, she wasn't having it. She's like, "You have to do it."
She's probably thinking, Dad, a few more years and then I'll do it.
Right, right. Well, it's interesting. I
That's
asked
cool.
my referee that I actually brought into the sport and
Hmm.
groomed him and all that. But I asked him one time because it just gets so chaotic before a tournament, all the questions, this and that. And you definitely don't do it to get rich, just like you don't arm wrestle to get
Yeah.
rich. And I asked him one time, I said, Why do we do this?" And his answer was, "Because nobody else will." And there are people out there that will, but yeah, I think they're few and far in between because it is work. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel a satisfaction from it. I do. And like I
Yeah.
said, when I asked her about how much longer do we want to do this, do we want to keep doing it? And yeah, 11-year-old girl jumped all over me and said, "No, we have to do it." And so
That's so awesome. She's got so much passion
yeah,
for
I
it.
don't. So I don't have
And
reservations to stop at this point.
and she's had some accomplishments herself. Want to tell us what she's done?
Yeah, she's actually, and you can look all this stuff up online and see pictures and different websites and news organizations and stuff like that. But she is a four-time Utah State champion. She
Oh wow.
actually is the youngest, I was told, the youngest state champion in any sport, and it's in arm wrestling. At 3 years old, she won the 5 to 7-year-old division. I always say
Wow.
she was born on an arm wrestling table.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the youngest, you asked how did she win at 3 against 5 to 7? Well, I'm the promoter, so I threw her in there. I was like, "You want to arm wrestle, baby?" And put her in there, which I
I
do
love
it for.
that.
I do that for other. Usually it's arm wrestling fathers ask me, "Can my son or daughter compete when they're younger than that?" And I'm like, "Yes, absolutely." So
Yes.
the division really should be like 0 to 5 or 0 to 7, but
Hmm.
I tweak them a little bit year by
I
year.
love that. That's great. I love that. And I see why she's so fired up about it. That's great. And she's got a great future. She's already started off pretty amazingly. And women's arm wrestling is really big. I mean, it's always been around, but it's really getting kind of big because now you see. I guess I don't know if this is really true. I do remember seeing women's competitions all the time too. But would you think it's gotten bigger in recent years or come closer to the men's side?
It's still not near as big as the men, but I will tell you, I trained my wife to arm wrestle. She was a national champion, and so I really love the women's arm wrestling. Sometimes it's more exciting than the men, so I do follow women's
Yeah.
arm wrestling. And in Utah here, especially the last I want to say 5 years, it's blown up with. I mean, I call them really elite women arm wrestlers. We have
Yeah.
so many world champions in the state now that it's just crazy. And they all meet up at these tournaments here, so you get to see these top level women compete with each other, at these tournaments. And yeah, it's insane
Yeah.
because years ago it was hard to get three in a division, four in a division, and sometimes you'll get 8, 9, 10 in a division, which is pretty good for a division, of women. So I believe it will just get bigger and bigger. I have hopes, with these new organizations that it will become a sport where people can actually do that for a living. and
That would
because
be
us
great.
Americans, we got to work a full-time job and arm wrestle on the side and then be expected to compete at a world level, against,
Yeah.
the Europeans. And, a lot of them don't
They're
have to
monsters
work
over
for
there.
good money. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I have hopes. I
Um,
was just telling her about that this morning. I said, explaining to her about the high strangeness, why arm wrestling would be on that podcast, and that it's not
yeah.
that popular in the US, but it is becoming more and more popular. But she, was wondering why, and it's because it's where we're, with the over the top, like I said, it took off everywhere else. They're getting, government money. They get paid to arm wrestle. We have to work full time and kind of make it our life at the same time. So it
Yeah.
does make it tough. But with these organizations that are out, I told her by the time you're an adult, you might be able to make a living at it. To where I'll probably be an old
Right.
man. The bummer is it'll probably
Well,
be too late for me, but
I
but
know, right? It's crazy. But the thing is, even with social media and athletes getting a bigger platform to show their successes, she might even it might even be something social media wise that where she pulls in money for being an athlete in arm wrestling because there's now full time. Well, I don't know if they're full time, but there's definitely some podcasters doing arm wrestling
right.
only stuff, and so it's changing. So yeah, she could. You see this with some other athletes, right? Where at the college level they're making tons of money just because they're a top level athlete and they have exposure, and they're in a sport that's not maybe a moneymaker. So yeah, maybe arm wrestling will be in that place in the future. So that's really cool.
And that's what I've heard actually now that you bring it up, that YouTube is, allowing people to do more and more. Um,
Yeah,
and Devin Lair out of Canada, he's your most popular YouTuber or arm wrestler, and he's great. He's a super heavyweight champion or heavyweight champion now, I believe. But he's gotten a ton of followers. And so a lot of people are coming in the sport just because they watch his YouTube channel. And like I said,
yeah,
I've always gotten calls and emails because I guess I'm easy to find on the internet. I guess not a lot of other people have that social media, set up. And it wasn't something
yeah.
I even went out to set up. I just had people do it for me
Hmm.
in case people do need to contact or find a place to practice. And so I get a lot of people from up north, your area where you're at in Salt Lake
Yeah,
area that are looking for a practice. And fortunately for them, I know a lot of people, a lot of arm wrestlers up there. And there's actually quite a few groups up there. In I don't know if you call that northern Utah, but up north from us anyway. And so there are, if somebody wants to get involved, there are practices. Um,
right, right.
our practice in
Well,
southern
let's.
Utah used to be the biggest thing going on. From
Yeah,
Vegas to Salt Lake, in between was it was us. But some life took some turns, and I had to move, and now I'm further out, so it's definitely not what it was as far as our practice goes. But I do still have a set of guys that come over weekly, and we practice, and some of them like it better because they get more one-on-one time with me. It's hard when you have a big
mm,
group, and I have a guy now that we do a lot of one-on-one time. And then that's the thing about the sport too. You build friendships kind of all over the U.S., all over the world for some people,
yeah,
where you only see these people
that's
at,
great
at tournaments. So it becomes like a kind of a family in a sense.
for sure. And since we're here, let's talk about that for a minute. So if they're in southern Utah, um, how would they reach out to you just to get some advice or to find out about training or competitions or anything like that? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Right. Well, we do have southernutah.net. It is now. We have Southern Utah a Facebook page. If you pull up Utah Arm Wrestling, Southern Utah Arm Wrestling, Jeff Kirby Arm Wrestling online, you'll find a lot of stuff on there. Email Southern Utah Arm Wrestling at gmail.com. That's how you got a hold of me.
Yeah.
My phone number's on there. So it's pretty easy to find. Sometimes they'll be looking for a practice, and thinking about it, a lot of these practices, most of them are not listed. So it's kind of like word of mouth. When they get a hold of me, we are listed, and we are listed as a practice as well. But when they get a hold of me and they're from up north, then I can point them in the right direction. And that's how it kind of works up north. But down here,
Yeah.
we were, I think, a little more computer savvy, maybe, or I had people around me that were. And so, and still are. But that's where we have a website and means of advertisement in a sense. I mean, we don't throw out these huge advertisements, but if they look for it, they'll find it.
Yeah, it was very easy to find you, Jeff, and I thought that was great. And you have a good setup that gives people kind of a feel for what's happening and stuff like that. And easy to reach out to you, which I think is great.
Right. And
Um,
oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, and what do you think? This may not apply directly because I'd like to give advice to people outside of Utah. If somebody's in a different area, let's say they're in Florida or they're in North Carolina, what would be your advice or suggestion if they are wanting to try to pull an arm wrestle in their neighborhood? Is I mean, they're going to have to do some research and some looking, but do you have any thoughts about what's the best way for them to try to locate somebody?
Right. And it is kind of tough. There are sites that are trying to do this, put all the practices on a site, and I can't think of the name of it at this point. But I know if it was me and I was in Florida, I would go on Facebook and start with Florida Arm Wrestling, um, you know, Texas Arm Wrestling, and there's going to be names similar to that. I know there's the Texas Arm Wrestling League, and they're huge. Um,
Yeah.
because it's all gone social media, Facebook now, to where years ago it was on and I think they still exist. I just don't think people are using them. But there was Northeast Message Board. It was called Arm Wrestling, and they had everything on there. Tournaments. There was fine practices, all kinds of stuff, and I enjoyed that. Now that it's on Facebook, it's not in one place, because everybody has
Yeah.
these separate pages. And to me, I didn't care for that because of that reason. You can't just go on one thing and find, okay, Florida right here, here's all the practices. And so,
Hmm.
it's not organized that greatly when it comes to that. And like I said, people up north find me down here, and then I have to refer them.
Right.
But same thing. Like, would you say North Carolina? That's what I would go after. North Carolina Arm Wrestling, and hopefully you would find somebody involved somewhere in the vicinity that could point you in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing. Find something and then work it backwards. And people in the arm wrestling community, my experience has always been they've been very friendly, very good, very supportive, and will help you find the next person that you need to find. So, yeah, people should do that. Very good. Okay, so let's do one thing. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but there is something very different and very unique about you as an athlete. And so I'd like to talk about that for a minute, and then I want to talk about styles of arm wrestling after that. So for those people who don't know Jeff has one arm. And so he talked about playing sports earlier in this episode. So he's played sports with one arm successfully because you had this condition from a child, you said, is that correct?
Correct. I was born without my right arm. They really don't know why. It could have been this, could have been that, could have been an injury to my mother. They're not sure. An X-ray. Uh, they're not sure, but yeah, I mean, like I said, my life is pretty interesting. Originally, I wasn't born in Michigan. I was born in East Chicago, and we lived in the projects. We were the only white family, and I learned how to protect myself and run really fast, and so my grandfather was a police officer, so he moved us to Upper Michigan, and that's really where I started with the sports. There was hockey was huge, wrestling was huge in Michigan and Wisconsin. There were people's entire basements dedicated to just that, and so I didn't think any big deal of this kid's arm wrestling with one arm. I was just wrestling like everybody else was, and a pretty tough kid. So I and a thinker. So I became good at it. And and I wasn't sure if this would come up or not, but yeah, I wish I would have taken them out, but I still have my newspaper clippings, from 1989 when I was in high school, and trophies and medals, because I made varsity as a freshman, which is, not common. I was the second person in the history of the high school. So I was a pretty good wrestler, and
Yeah.
expected to go far, to go to college and all that. And kind of, I had a bad side to me as far as wanting to party and doing stupid things like that. And it would kind of derail my training life is what it did. And, so I was good at these sports, but I kind of wouldn't totally follow through with life. I look back at it now and it's like, God, I wish I would have done that. But there was a college wrestler later missing his arm, and he wrote a book called One Arm Raised. And sometimes I think that was supposed to be me. I just maybe it wasn't, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But but I played hockey. I was the captain of my hockey team the last year I played. Um, so I wasn't just in sports, but I was good at sports. I always had it.
Right.
Something in me told me I want to be the best. I don't want to be as good as you because I'm missing my arm. I want to be better than you. And that's just what it's
I
always
think that's
been for
amazing.
arm wrestling too.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a wonderful story, and kind of one to help other people realize too. Like, look, everybody gets their circumstance, whatever it is. Make the best of it. In your case, you were a good athlete already, and look, you're an arm wrestler, a top level arm wrestler with one arm. And I think the reason why I think that's important for people too is I've seen people arm wrestle who have a bad leg or one leg or different things like that. There is ways and opportunities, and usually the organization will help the person if for some reason, you have some kind of a disability or something that makes you different. There's still a way a lot of times to still compete in arm wrestling. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, when you look at like a world level, you won't see this at local tournaments or state level, but or even really national level, maybe to qualify. But you have sit down as far as people in wheelchairs. You have disabled sit down divisions, disabled stand up divisions, because there would be a problem going against somebody in a wheelchair. The height of the table. Do you keep it down here? Do
Right.
you? Um, so you do have all that. Bob Brown up north, he's a friend of mine. He's I don't know how many time world champion. He's done it quite a bit longer than me, but he got in an accident. He's missing his leg, and he's a bit older than me, but he's still a top guy. He's a top teacher, top trainer. He's really the
Yeah.
guy up north, northern Utah. But so some of us do have quote unquote disabilities, and still compete at that level. Or I forget that I'm missing an arm until people remind me. So I ask
Right.
him what happened, you know.
Right.
So that's
That's
kind of,
great.
and I've just realized that really the last few years of I don't even think about it. That I'll get. How can you do that with one arm? I can't, and that's what I've learned too. And I don't want to sound arrogant or cocky, but just because you can't do it with one arm doesn't mean I can't. There's a
Right.
difference there, and it's not that I'm any better than you. It's the fact this is how I've been forever. I try to
Right.
explain it to people. Imagine, okay, would I do better with two arms? I don't know, but what I do think is let's put a third arm on you and see if you do better or if it gets in your way. And it because
Right.
that was the thing too. They fitted me with a prosthetic as a kid. Well, I went down to the local bowling alley to play video games. Arcades were big back then, and I couldn't play the video game anymore. So that thing came off and went in the backpack. And because I've always used this part of the arm to push the buttons and stuff, so I had this
Right.
thing in my way, and so a
I love
prosthetic
it.
didn't make me better. It actually made me feel disabled, is what it did.
Right.
So that kind of went,
Right.
in the backpack and then the toy box eventually, and just didn't use it. At that point, I was probably 10, 11 years old, and I've been like that for 10 or 11 years. So it got in my
Yeah.
way, is what it did.
Well, Jeff, thanks for sharing some of that. That's inspiring for people to understand and realize that you can be you, right? You can do your thing, in other sports and in arm wrestling, there's an opportunity for you to just do what you need to do. And, whether it's a bum leg or a knee or a foot or something. I mean, there may be different ways that they can accommodate, but you can still compete. So
Right.
good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, let me ask you this question now. I think this is important for people. Different styles of arm wrestling, right? So we've talked earlier, just for a minute, that you became a top roller. You were a hooker. You could do it inside. You became a top roller, but can do both. So there's inside arm wrestling, hooking, and then there's also like pressing and stuff like that. Do you want to talk about any of those techniques just to help people realize in their mind like what's going on in each of those types of styles?
Yeah.
And I know there's sub styles. There's like sub things to those as well,
Right.
but we don't need to get into that. Yeah.
Okay. And, that's the thing I would say about a new arm wrestler is they'll usually generally start in a hook. Early on, I realized I was fast and I could just hook and take them, try to take them down, but it's more of a power move. An inside move, more of a power move, to where you look at a top roll and it's an outside, a defensive move. So if somebody's hooking you, you can go to the outside and defend against it. And arm wrestling is so technical. It really is so technical, where I say you got the 3 S's: speed, strength, and skill. And I think skill definitely is at the top of that. People could argue about speed and strength, but and they're all important. I'm not saying they're not. They're all important, but without the skill, it's like me. Okay, I'm a lightweight. I'm a 150 pounder. When people come over here that are 200 plus pounds, look like bodybuilders, and they have me take them down, no problem, they're baffled. Well, a lot of that, I'm looking at them and I keep them away from their power. I want them away from their power. And a lot of times I will do that with a top roll, come out on the end of their hand, open their fingers up and take their strength away. Now, all of a sudden, all that big bulky muscle isn't as important. They would probably beat me if they had, well, I know they would if they had that same technique, but they don't have it. And then I've been blessed with speed too. If you pull up on YouTube and watch, I put a series of videos together of my wins, of me going through people. And it's so fast, because if you can get to that move, let's say they are technical. Well, if you can get to your move before they get to theirs, it puts them in a really bad spot. It really does. And so, you have a hook, which is an inside move. Like I said, in boxing terms, it's a Mike Tyson move. It's a strength move. And outside is known as more of a defensive move. And, in boxing, it'd be Muhammad Ali, an outside, more of a technical move. But then it gets interesting too, because with a top roll outside, you don't have to use that as a defensive move. You can use that as an offensive move. And that's kind of what I've done with what's called a high hand top roll. Is I'll still top roll and keep them away from their power, but I'll do it in an aggressive way. So I'm not running from them and being defensive. I'm attacking them, but a little bit different. And, so there's so much more. When new people come over to a practice, what I've learned is you'll have a few of us just hitting them with so much information that they're overwhelmed. It's too much. So we've learned to slow down. And a lot of times I'll let somebody else take them and just kind of stay away for a little while until they get to that level, because I realize we're all hitting them with information and stuff we know because we've been doing it for years. But it's because and usually the reaction is the same as, I didn't realize there was so much to it. And I've heard that so many times. And because there is a lot to it, and I'm still learning. I haven't hit that, that peak of I'm finished. I know everything. I don't know that anybody will ever know everything, because, there's always new things too. You didn't hear of the King's move. It was around, but it wasn't popular until, not that long ago, when Michael Todd made it popular, and either people love it or they hate it. But its technique is what it is. It's technique.
It is.
So
it is, and it's a endurance game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you kind of wear and bleed out the other guy. I'm curious, what do you think about the aside from it being a legitimate technique, like, what do you feel? How do you think about the King's move? For me, I don't love it. But it's a legitimate technique that really does work. But I'm curious what you think about it.
And that's the thing. And I really think I have a good opinion about this because I don't use the King's move. I don't like it for me. I feel like it, your arms open. I feel when I have tested it in practice, I feel like I'm going to get hurt and I don't like it.
Yeah.
But I can look at a Michael Todd and say, wow, it's great for him. He has perfected it. And so I definitely, people have talked about wanting it banned in the sport. I don't agree with that at all. I think it's a great move. And I've had people here at practice who have been able to adapt to it better than I have. So personally for me, I don't like it, but for some others, I definitely have a huge respect for it. And it makes what it did in Wall was made very exciting matches. Best match I've ever seen was Michael Todd versus Devin Lair in their super match in Wall. And when I talk super matches, a lot of new people don't understand what that is. That's when you arm wrestle the same person, usually either 3, 5, or 6 times, and the winner, who gets the most wins. And they would go on. I mean, I want to say 15 minutes, a 15-minute match. And when you're talking the average match is 15 seconds or less, that's huge. But it kind of created excitement and drama. And so I really thought it was good for the sport for that reason. But you have a lot of people who hate it too. If you read online, they just don't like it. So, and maybe it's beaten.
It's crazy. So. Well, I think it's funny, and and I really think one of the most technical arm wrestlers out there is Devin Larratt, who has found a way to use every one of these. I remember when he didn't do any King's move, but he's used it over the last 5 years, and is pretty good at it actually when he needs to do it. It's like you're saying, there's an evolution not only in what's hot in the sport or what's being very successful, but as an individual, as an arm wrestler, there's opportunities for you to evolve too.
Right. And like you said, he's a very technical arm wrestler. And rather than looking at it and saying, I hate it, he looked at it as that's a very advanced form of arm wrestling, is what I've heard him say, and adapted it. And like you said, he's good at it. He's good at it.
Yeah, he is.
And it does, and I say it's a chess match too, because there is a counter to a King's move. There's a counter to a hook. There's a counter to a top roll. So there's a counter to a counter to a counter. So it becomes a chess match. It really does. A lot of times in a tournament, I sit and watch my opponents. Hopefully I don't come up, the very first one, because I'll watch. So I know where to hit them and beat them, by countering or staying out of, their move. And so it's really a chess match. But then you have to have the strength and speed to perform, the moves. So it's very technical, a lot more than people have any idea that it is. And
I think it's fun to see styles go against styles. So just recently we had Levon go against, and I can't remember his name, the guy here from the United States who's Cataract, who presses, right? Very quick. He's pressed. He can do other things too, but that's where he is elite. And people didn't know what was going to happen, right? Because Levon clearly is top of the heap in strength and size and everything.
Right.
But could he handle that kind of a press was the question. Now, he did pretty easily.
Right.
But that was the interesting part about it. So what's going to happen? What is going to happen?
Right. And really it was more technical than a lot of people realize, because, Jerry's not just a presser, but he's a flop presser. He allows his wrist, which is, against the fundamentals of arm wrestling. You want to break your opponent's hand back. Well, he lets his break back and presses. Well, Levon was very smart. Instead of going high, he went low and kept him from breaking his own wrist back, which is very interesting, and was able to beat him pretty easy because of that. But
very technical. With all that you just said, extremely technical.
Right. And it's really
and to do it at the moment.
Scissors rock too, because Jerry has been very successful against like Michael Todd, because the counter to the King's move is the press, and he's very good. He's a very good presser. So, they say styles make fights, and definitely styles make arm wrestling matches too. It makes it very interesting.
Yeah. I love it. It's fun to watch. Okay. So as a new arm wrestler, somebody come in and to try this sport out, somebody may be thinking, oh, I need to do this or to do that. I need to spend a lot of time curling or doing forearms. I always used to tell people back in the day, all those things are important, but table time is probably the most important thing. What are your thoughts on where a person should start in arm wrestling as a brand new person?
Exactly what you said. Table time is the number one thing. You gain everything from table time. You learn to hit and use your speed. It makes you stronger exactly where you need to be stronger, because a lot of these exercises, they're great and make you stronger, but you want to target exactly where you arm wrestle, because a lot of these weightlifters will come in and they'll hurt for a week. Actually, new people will hurt for a good week, be sore from arm wrestling. But I've been preaching for years. Table time is the thing. It's the most important. I've seen people who just lift weights come to a tournament and they'll get destroyed. They do. But with the table time, they learn, and that's the thing about arm wrestlers. You see, like in Over the Top, we were talking about, where they hate each other and they're mean to each other. And arm wrestling, you make a lot of friends. You really do, and you make a lot of friends everywhere. And everybody, even at a tournament, they have something called the after pull. And that's where people stay after the tournament and they arm wrestle with each other and show each other things and stuff like that. So, but really, you kind of have to make your sacrifices on the table, and definitely. Yeah. So I would say find a practice, go to a practice. Even with working out with weights, I'm the type of person, okay, I can't even lose weight to look good or be healthy. I drop weight for a national or a world level. Then I'm motivated. And same thing with working out. A lot of people love working out. And I wish I was like that. I'm not like that. I will only work out moves pertaining to arm wrestling. And it's just what it is, and there's a lot to it. There's pronation, supination, cupping, back pressure, side pressure, and I'll work those things out. And I haven't done this in a while, but when I got back into it, I would keep weights, pull with ankle weights on the end of it in my car. I figure, hey, if I'm driving 20 minutes to work, I'm working out while I'm driving. And then I would go on breaks and work out, and lunch and work out, and on the way home. So I'd get all these little micro workouts, constantly just building those things stronger and stronger and stronger. And in practice, you will find out where you're weak and what needs to be worked on too. And that's a huge thing with practice, not just learning, but even after years of doing it, I can arm wrestle with somebody and tell them, hey, okay, your weakness is your wrist. Your arm is so strong, but it's easy to break your wrist back. And, so then they start working on that. Okay, I'm going to make my cup stronger and get that strong, and it'll make them better at arm wrestling.
So a lot of people will hear the term, if they start looking at the sport, cupping. Can you talk about that? Just explain it for our audience when they hear the term cupping.
Right. And cupping is just simply bending your wrist. That's cup. But, you have supination this way, pronation this way, but then you can mix them, let's say supination and cup, which is what you want to do. See, now I'm doing both that way. Same thing with a hook. I'm supinating and I'm cupping at the same time. You can just cup, but you're going to be a lot more effective. Let's say you adapt and you really like the top roll and you feel like you're good there and you're actually doing something there. Well, you want to work your cup and your pronation and your back pressure. I mean, there's a lot to it, really. To where I've done that, I've worked my back pressure so much I can pull anybody over to my side of the table. And I always say that when I'm training somebody. You want them in your backyard. The closer your arm is to your body, the stronger you are. And the further their hand is from their body, the weaker they are. So you use that back pressure. Back pressure was like witchcraft in arm. When you arm wrestle somebody that doesn't know how to arm wrestle, and you pull them to your
Yeah.
side of the table, you can just sit there and talk to them and breathe a little bit, and they're pulling because really you're using your whole body against their arm is what you're doing.
Right.
But and then you get on a pro level or a high level, and there's a lot more to that. You have guys that are training all of it. So there was a point where I could get the back pressure, but then my side pressure was weaker, so I start building that up, and hopefully you learn that in practice, but sometimes you learn it in tournaments as well. But
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, let's talk a little bit about training. Just lightly. So, if somebody's interested in arm wrestling, the thought is, well, arm wrestle, right? But if they're going to come in and spend some time with a team, in this case, let's say they're coming to work out with you and stuff, what is their training day going to look like? What do you think?
Well, they'll come in, they'll learn moves at first. Okay, if they come to arm wrestling, they're going to arm wrestle with us for a good hour, a minimum, and they probably
Yeah.
won't be able to lift weights throughout the week because they're going to hurt too
Right.
much. They're going to be sore. Eventually, that soreness does lessen, and then you can add weights into it. I'm the type of arm wrestle personally for me is when there's no tournaments going on or anything like that, I'll just do the practice once a week and I'll practice hard. And then when I'm starting to look at tournaments, a minimum of 4 months, I'll start really training certain things that I feel like need to be trained where I'm feeling a little weaker in practice. And so I'll target those things and I'll train them hard for that 4 months leading up to the tournament. And then when it's tournament time, you want to take that break too, is why I was going into that, because before, some people 2 weeks. For me, a week before a tournament, I won't do anything. I'll just let everything rest and rebuild, and high protein, just trying to rebuild everything and, to get that rest. We have a guy, and his goal, he was telling me, is to beat me. And, he weighs a bit more than I do, all that. But every practice, it seemed like he'd get hurt. His just tendons or something was not made for it. So he would back off and practice real light and do his weights and do his weights. And, and this was for years too, it seemed like. And then the last couple of years, he's finally built up to where he doesn't get hurt anymore and he can arm wrestle for probably 2 hours. And so, I think everybody's a little bit different. To your question, but at the same time, it really needs to start with practice. Not just keeping safe too. There's, to your audience, there's an arm break position, which makes it very easy to break your humerus. Usually, it's a spiral fracture. It's like taking, your humerus with one hand twisting it one way, with the other hand twisting it the other way, and ending up with your elbow on the outside of your arm, turning away. It's called the arm break position. A referee will warn you, turn towards your hand. If you don't, he can foul you, which, I'd much rather be fouled than have a broken arm for sure.
Right.
But, so to learn safety and, like I said, where your strength is at and things like that, safe positions where your strength's at, I'll have somebody come and just focus on that for a while. And then once they get used to it, I can tell them where they're feeling weak and start implementing weights and workouts for that. So really, I advise somebody new coming in, even people that have been around. I would say the way to get good at arm wrestling is to arm wrestle.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, and I think people also should just keep in mind that there's a lot of benefit to working with a group and somebody who can mentor you, like in your case, Jeff, because of positioning of your arm and your body and the way you turn for safety first. Like if you really understand the safety part first, that's going to help you a lot. And the other thing too is, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, Jeff, right? There's a lot of just aches and pains that come along with arm wrestling. So don't be afraid, folks. If you're doing it and you have these weird aches and pains in parts of your arm, like here and here, because these are things that happen with arm wrestling. Do you want to talk about that for a quick
Right.
second?
And usually, with the experience, when somebody tells me where they're hurting, I can tell them why. Usually, okay, you're applying all that side pressure and your arm's not ready for it. So, and there will be, I don't want to call them micro injuries that won't put you in the hospital, but will kind of keep you out for months sometimes. And I started thinking while you were talking, because arm wrestling is an interesting sport, and I still see people commenting on that today. Well, it's just a sport, you're using your arm, and that part's not true there. When I first started arm wrestling tournaments, my stomach would be bruised up. My stomach would be sore from the table, and a lot of people on there, because with arm wrestling, you arm wrestle with the one arm, but with the other arm, there's a peg you hold on to it. And usually they'll get a bruise on their arm right there. Well, that comes from the corner of the table. But, so with experience, you do learn where these things come with, or, where these things are coming from. Not always, though. But, yeah, you will have tons of aches and pains. I like them because I feel like I'm getting stronger. Of course, unless it gets to the point where I go to the grocery store and I go to pick up my milk and I can't because it hurts. then I know,
Right.
Oops, okay, I pushed it too hard, and which happens all the time. But like I said, I've had a lot of injuries, but nothing to. I mean, this is the only arm I have, so it's like I can't break this. And I never worried about it. As a kid, I thought I'll go as hard and fast and strong as I can. I'll let my arm break before it goes down. And now it's like, okay, if I'm in a bad position, I'd rather go down and get another shot at you, and that's technique. Yeah. That's smartness. That's experience.
That is. That's like slipping.
Yeah,
right? It's like slipping.
Almost all your tournaments are double elimination, which is perfect for arm wrestling because sometimes I've lost. I've gotten a bad grip, ready to go, and lost. Know I can beat this guy. Come back in the semifinals and destroy him because I know what I okay, I got a bad start. I got a bad grip, and it happens. So, if you mess up, you get another try, which is double elimination. Elimination is great for arm wrestling. I do know of one tournament that's triple elimination, which is not common, and I'm not really familiar with that format. But usually you're going into it just like the movie Over the Top. It's double elimination. You got to lose twice to be out.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Now, assuming somebody's out there and they are now arm wrestling, they've been involved for a little bit, and now they want to try a tournament out or two. What sort of mental approach does a new competitor do? And then share for a minute, for somebody at your level, like how you approach competitions and people that you're going to go against.
Well,
can you share?
When it's a new person, most likely they're going to lose. That's what it comes down to. I hate to say it, but most likely they're going to lose. So.
And it's okay.
And I usually take a new guy and I say, your goal is to try to win one match. And then they'll get it after a couple tournaments. And I say, okay, now your goal needs to be to try to place in the top 3, get a medal, try to place, and then when you hit a point, if you're going to train enough and have enough talent and all that, I hit a point where I was unbeaten for like 6 years. And to where I got injured and it didn't matter. I was like, that's okay. I'm going to beat these guys with speed and technique. It's, that's what I do anyway. I'm going to win. And I actually lost to a guy who I beat all day long in practice. No problem. And, but you get to that point where you expect to win. And it's kind of a double-edged sword because you're telling the people you're training because they're newer, no, it's okay. Everybody loses. But then you're harder. Somebody like me is harder on myself. It's like, I expect to win. And, even now, I came back after a divorce, all that, a couple of years ago, and it seemed like I was untouchable. Well, about February of last year, I got double pneumonia. I went sepsis, almost died in the hospital. I was there and this was just last February. And, got out and did 2 tournaments in a row and didn't do well. But, my mentality is, it's what I do. It's but it happens. Sometimes it's a fine line. I'll practice with these guys where their goal in life is to beat me. They don't know how close they are sometimes, and I'll tell them. I say, "You're closer. You're on my heels. You're closer than you think you are."
Yeah.
But sometimes
Yeah.
to you, you know what I mean? Just that little bit makes a difference. I always say millimeters in arm wrestling make a huge difference. They do, not only in your workout, but in your grip, the way you start, just everything.
Yeah. That's cool. That's good to know for people to just be able to think about how this normally works.
Right.
And it's okay.
And
It's okay.
I thought when I found my first tournament, I thought, oh, I'm the best in the world. I've always beat everybody. I've always beat 400-pound guys, no problem. This is not. I'm not even going to make weight. I'll just stay where I'm, in this weight class. And you win, and it happens almost, not always, but almost. I would say 99% of the time, you lose. That's what happens, and it's a wake up call. Then at that point, and that's where it's better that happened in practice. I just went straight to a tournament, but at that point, whether in practice or in a tournament, you really have to think to yourself, okay, is this something I want to work to be good at, or did I just expect to be good? I'm not, so I quit. And I see both, and I see both. I would say a majority of people that come to practice, like I said, when I say, well, they've never been beaten before, I'll say, well, you're about to lose, and not in a cocky manner. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll never come back. It's the reality. And, and I try to lift people up and push them and point out their qualities. No, you're good here. You're strong. You just have to know how to use it, but sometimes they don't want to put the work in, and that happens a lot. So a lot.
Well, and that's why I wanted to bring this up, because I think people, they just need to realize that losing is part of the path, that soreness, aches, these are normal things. Don't be frightened off. Don't be scared off.
Right.
Because these are things that come with the game, and that makes you stronger, right? Okay, Jeff, has there ever been a major rival for you? Somebody that just, you knew that you were going to be coming up against them at some point in some competition or whatever, and they made you sweat a little bit because you knew you had to be at the top of your game. Was there ever a reoccurring person like that in your career that you had to contend with?
I know it takes the excitement away, but there hasn't been really. A lot of times, since I'm in a lower weight class, if I lose to somebody, it's like, okay, that tournament I was telling you I was injured. I lost to that guy. No big deal. I lost to another guy. Well, I focused on him. I'm going to heal. I'm going to beat him. I know I can beat him. And then he moves up a weight class. And it's like, so, and that happens. People change weight classes and things like that. So there's never been like a long-term rival or nemesis. I go in a tournament, not thinking, ooh, that guy, he's going to be tough. I just look at him all the same. Okay, I'm going to win. That mindset, I'm going to win. I'm going to beat him. I'm going to take first place. That's why I'm here. Kind of, they need to accept that. But then, there's times where it doesn't, you're shocked. I remember the state championship. It was probably 4 years ago. Like I said, he got a better grip on me. I lost to the guy. Well, I'd beaten him every time before. So I went to what's called the losers bracket, fought my way back, arm wrestled him, beat him easy. But now I'm in the finals against a guy who just destroyed everybody. And I know I have that one loss. I got to beat him twice to win. And, and this was a match I really remember. It was like, okay, this young kid is dangerous. He's just beating everybody. I'm in a bad position. I have a loss. And so where I'm good to is my hit, ready, go, putting everything into it and fast. And I remember I hit him and he kind of stopped me. And so I loaded up to hit him again, and it sounded like a stick broke and his arm broke. And this was in the finals.
Oh, wow.
And right away I knew. Everybody else was confused, but you see me, mouth kind of a cuss word like, oh crap, we'll say. And but it was a bad deal. But what it is too with him, he was so strong and he was getting good training, but his bones weren't adapted to it yet. And so I used to think, go to tournaments right away. Well, now I've kind of turned to let your bones and let your tendons and things adapt to it a little bit. Maybe do 6 months
Yeah.
to a year before you start doing tournaments. That's not how
Yes.
I did it, but I think it's probably the smarter way to go.
Well, it's funny because I remember seeing a few breaks in person. I remember one time I was on deck and it happened, and it was when I was newer in the sport.
Right.
And I, and I was like, uh-oh, just freaked out for a minute. But
It makes you not want to
it's
arm
a
wrestle. That's what it does.
yeah, it can be pretty scary. But it's like you said, good preparation, good positioning and knowledge, safety knowledge will help you. So people shouldn't be scared about that. You should respect it and then learn how to prepare against that.
Right, right.
So, yeah.
Because
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, because when there is a lot of times there's injuries and you don't see them because they don't make loud noises. But when there is an injury like that, it kind of takes it out of everybody. It puts, I think, that bit of fear into them. I've had people come up to me after something like that's happening, and being a tournament, coordinator or director, saying, you know what, I had one guy, I don't have anything to prove. I'm in the finals. I'm going to pull out. And I'm thinking, what? But, it just put that into him.
He got freaked out.
Now, me, I know I'll have those thoughts sometimes, but mostly it's like, okay, I'm prepared. I've been doing it for years. The chances of my arm breaking are so small that, I stay out of the bad positions. I'm accustomed to it. So, and that's the number one thing. Your arm's probably going to go down before it breaks, as long as you're not in a bad position.
Right, right. Okay, getting towards the end of our time here. A couple more questions. Would you say, what do you think has changed in the sport over the years that you've competed? Have you noticed a change in the sport?
You have little bits of change here and there. I can go down to little things like in the movie Over the Top, and I've seen these tables. They used to have round, like cup pads instead of square pads. So that's changed. First time I was ever placed in a strap, if you watch the movie Over the Top again, you'll see it, and it's the first strap I ever had on. It was a leather, like round circle with a leather strap, and they put it through your thumb. I remember they asked me, do you want it on you or him? I didn't know, so I just guessed.
Yeah.
But, so that's changed to a nylon strap. With the strap, that's another thing that has changed, has just come about the last, I'm going to say 2 or 3 years, is they now do what's called a fair strap, where they put it through the, not the buckle, but where the straps meet. And, so the straps have changed. Wall really tried to change things to the point where I didn't care for certain things. They tried to change the start. Usually you go up to a table, depending on the league, you get 30 seconds to a minute to grip up. If you can't agree on a grip, then you'll get what's called a referee's grip. Well, with Wall, you go up and it's called a set grip, where the referee holds you, says, close your hands, ready, go. So they kind of almost put a referee's grip to the start, but it's called a set grip. So they really tried to change things a little bit. They made bigger pads, which a lot of people didn't like. Maybe it caused some injuries. I don't know. I like the bigger pads because I have a tendency of slipping off the back of the pad and getting a foul. So for somebody with my style, they're great. But it depends what it caters to. But I've seen, straps change, tables change. Your basic tournaments have kind of really remained the same. They've always been double eliminations. You've always had weight classes. Usually the bigger the tournament is, the more the classes. That's about it. It hasn't changed a lot, but little things have changed. Yeah. I've heard people still talking about the strap is a big one, and it's a big controversy because, people are still wanting to change the strap, even though it's just changed recently to try to make it fairer. It's the fair strap. Now they're talking about the fairer strap. So, and I think there is still some evolution that needs to be done there. advantages, disadvantages, picking the correct side of the table in a tournament to give you the advantage just in case you slip out. There is that. When I teach people how to strap pull, that's something I teach them. Go after that side of the table. It'll give you an advantage. And really in arm wrestling, it should be fair on both sides of the table, but sometimes it's not, so.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I've noticed over the years, not necessarily in competition, but some of the training equipment, like the wrist ball and things like that, which I think is so cool.
Right. I actually have.
And I feel like that's been driven by overseas, some of their stuff. I think they've come up with it. Now there's companies here doing it, but the grips for the cable and all that stuff, really cool stuff.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point there. That's something I forgot to mention, because for years when I started, arm wrestlers always made their own stuff. You think of which motion you're using and you try to make something, a bicycle tube. And those things can still be used. Because some of these companies, people come up with the stuff, but then they put a pretty good price tag on it, and some people just can't afford it. So you can still home make your stuff, but there's so much more equipment. You bring up a great point. There's so much more equipment now than, when I first started. Even my arm wrestling table in here has a weight machine attached to it, and even back in the day, I would use a weight machine. You could put a table there. But now it's nice. It just attaches to the table. I have the wrist ball you've talked about. I have silicone hands, which are interesting. They're great for a hook and the feel of grabbing somebody else's hand. But it's funny. I have all this equipment nowadays, but usually I only use one or two things. A judo belt or a karate belt is great. Pronation. Yeah, it works great. So. You don't need a lot of money. A bicycle tube is a great one too. They say in arm wrestling, tendon strength is more important than muscle strength, and the way you strengthen tendon strength is by bands or a bicycle tube. And the reason why is because blood flow is low to the tendons to where it's high to the muscles. So you really have to work them out lighter with higher reps to get that blood flow to your tendons. And but so there are a lot of bands and things like that I feel are important.
Yeah, a lot of stuff out there for people to check out as they look into arm wrestling. Okay, Jeff, as we move towards the end here, any special goals for you going forward, either for you or the team, or just things that you want to accomplish in the sport going forward?
Well, like I said, I just was sick recently, and it's really been a setback. Our tournament in Salt Lake at FitCon, I've started implementing super matches to have a few super matches before the tournament starts, or challenge matches, and we're looking to bring some bigger names to that. There's an opportunity for me to arm wrestle in one and actually make some money. But I'm to a point now where it's like, and I've made money in the sport because I had a promoter in Vegas, and he would pay me to come arm wrestle for the Gary Sinise Foundation or Make-A-Wish. We would do these organizations, but and I'm not far from Vegas, an hour and a half. The money's far and few in between, so it is nice to make a little bit of money, but I don't feel like I'm at where I was 2 years ago because I got sick, but I will be. When you're, I don't want to say a champion, but when you have a champion's heart, you don't have the quit in you. It's okay. I will be better than I was 2 years ago. It's just a matter of working towards that. And that's what I'm doing now, is trying to build up to where I was. I've heard rumors that the World Championships are coming to Canada in a couple of years, so I'm eyeing that. I think in 3 years it's supposed to, WAF. That was the thing, is unless you had money to go arm wrestle in other countries, miles and miles away overseas, you couldn't. It was hard to prove yourself. A lot of them stay in America, and the U.S. does have some great arm wrestlers. Like I said, most of them can't dedicate 100% to it because they have to work and things like that. But, it started here. It really did, organize tournaments. But you have some great arm wrestlers, but a lot of them don't get the opportunity to go other places. So what I was getting at is like the world's coming to the U.S. They haven't come to the U.S. For the WAF. I want to say 2008 or 2010. So it's been and it's been a while, and even before that, I believe it was longer. So for something like that to come to Canada, it's huge because it's close. You don't have to cross the ocean anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm looking to get back my strength back, and I'm getting there. Like I said, I practice, once a week. It's Saturday. We'll be practicing tonight, and and start implementing more weights and stuff like that. So I wasn't weak because of an injury. I was weak because of a sickness, and it definitely took its toll. So, because I get the mindset I'm the same as I always was, and then I find out, oh, okay, I'm not at this point. So that's my goals right now. Is I will get to where I was in a short time, and I'm really eyeing if the World Championships do come to Canada. I plan on being there. So my daughter's never ridden on an airplane before, and so she's wanting to do it.
Well, I hope that happens, and I hope you're there. That would be so cool to follow that and to see how that goes. So, yeah, I mean, this is really cool. This is what it's all about, and people should be aware that there are people arm wrestling like John Brzenk, like Todd Hutchinson, even Alan Fisher. These guys are late 50s and into 60s.
Alan's a good friend of mine, and he's over 65, and he's a beast too. Look at his arms; it's crazy. That's one thing about arm wrestling is, okay, in boxing you hit 40, you're pretty much done. Certain sports, but arm wrestlers have shown that they've been able to hang in there for a long time. John Brzezink's he's like 60 years old. So Alan's older than that, older than what I said. And they're still competing at a pretty high level. John Brzezinck still, you see him on the King of the Tables and all that. And so they're able to compete and at an older age. I do believe some of that is technology, where a lot of your arm wrestlers are, not to bring it up, but they're getting testosterone replacement therapy. I get a lot of older guys that come over here and they're like, yeah, I do it. Do you have a problem with it? And it's not necessarily. It's kind of making it. I don't do it yet, but I'm definitely at an age where I might need to. But it makes more of an even playing field, because you're not putting off that testosterone like you once were. But at the same time, definitely arm wrestlers can go, I feel, top level into their 40s and 50s, without a doubt, because I've seen it. And that.
Well, and I was going to say, I feel like Devin Larratt did a round or two of stem cells too, which really brought some, rejuvenated his strength and arms.
And that's a big thing too right now, are the stem cells. Some guys I know they go to Mexico and get it done. I'm not promoting that. I don't know. But what I do know is, Devin, Michael Todd, Bob Brown's a huge one on stem cells. They swear by it as far as injuries go. So and it's made me very curious. Only issue is I've looked into the price, and it's extremely expensive. And I think that's why the people are going to other countries. So, but it's supposed to be very effective, and these guys swear by it.
Well, there's a lot out there. People enjoy it. It's a fun sport. Okay, just as we wrap up here, I want to ask you just a fun question. Who is your favorite arm wrestler?
That's hard to say, and I've thought about this many times. Greatest of all time, John Brzenk. He's done, if you don't know who he is, watch the documentary Pulling John. Best documentary ever made, I think. But he's like taking Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, all the greats, and wrapping them up into one. Nobody's been dominant in a sport as long as he has been. My second tournament, I met him, though. It's interesting. Arm wrestling, all these guys because it's a kind of a tight community. But I really like Michael Todd. I love Devin. I think he's probably the most technical arm wrestler in the world. I've learned things from him, like everybody else has. But I like Michael Todd right now. It's interesting
Yeah.
that Michael Todd, he went on a little bit. I don't want to say a losing streak, a low period, and now he's back and he's beating everybody. He's got a big match coming up soon. Winner of that gets Levon, and so and really like Levon's looked at as virtually unbeatable right now. The guy's huge. He's
Yeah.
strong. He's smart. He's technical. Um, I'm wondering if anybody has a chance of beating him, they would have to bleed him. And we all know Michael Todd with the King's move can bleed people. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying one thing or another, but I really like Michael Todd. I think he's a great guy. He came out to FitCon a couple years ago. Um, he's a believer in Christ like I am. He's just he's a good guy and he's an amazing arm wrestler. He's been around, I mean, forever. And like I said, he's hit his low points and he's on a definitely a a huge incline right now. He's at the top again. So I enjoy watching him. I think his style puts
Yeah.
on uh, great for the audience. They always say arm wrestling's not a spectator sport, especially to come sit at a tournament for 8 hours and just watch ready, go, win, ready, go. And to me, his matches really give an excitement to it. Some people hate it, some people love
Yeah.
it, but that's kind of anything in life, I think. So if I had to
Yeah.
pick down, point it to one arm wrestler, who's my very favorite, I would probably say Michael Todd.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, it's great. I mean, these guys are amazing out there. There's a lot of guys up there to really look at and enjoy. I've always loved, and this is just because I feel like this is the arm wrestler I would have been without an injury. You know, Rustam Babayev?
I know who he is, yeah.
Yeah, he's same size as me, same style, everything. So when I see him succeed at the levels he's succeeded, I thought, man, maybe that would have been me. So I've loved that. But
Oh, sorry. That's interesting because I look at Michael Todd and I don't King's move, but there's something that I appreciate about him. If I had to compare my style to like any one of those guys, closest my style, it would be Travis Bajan. So years ago before he
amazing
left the
guy.
sport.
Yeah.
My style's a lot like his. We both high hand top roll. We hit hard, fast, and but
And matches are over quickly,
they're quick.
right?
Yeah, they're quick. Like I said, if you or any of your listeners look up Southern Utah Arm Wrestling, Jeff Kirby Arm Wrestling, I just put another video out of my last 3 or 4 years of wins, and they're quick. They are. And there are. If you watch the previous one, I've been in a match for over a minute, and when you're in a match for, I know that doesn't sound long for a minute. It feels like a half an hour. So I want to get them.
That is a long
quick.
time.
You get the butterflies and everything else, and I want to go up there, win, and get down from there. And that's my goal. So if I'm in a minute match, that wasn't planned. That's not the plan, and especially in a
I
tournament.
keep thinking of.
Yeah,
I was saying I keep thinking of when Levon had that when he had to take oxygen and it was like a minute.
right. Yep. Yeah, those were
It's so
minute
expended. Yeah, it is a long time, a minute.
right.
Yeah, if you're in it for even 25 or 30 seconds, that takes a lot.
That's a long match. And okay, now super matches are becoming more popular where you have to win 3, 5, or 6 times. Well, I've always trained where I know I have a good 10 hard matches in me from practice. So I've always done well in super matches. And that's the thing too. You'll hit a guy and sometimes you want to sit there and not pin him and hold him there, not in a tournament, but in a super match. Because if they're going to fight, that's where Devin says, like, I'm going to make you pin yourself. Well, he targets their pride. I'm not going to pin myself. Well, now they're getting drained is what they're doing. So
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
lots of mental
Right.
strategy there as well. Okay, look, Jeff, this has been great. I've enjoyed this. Really love this topic, and I'm really going to be watching you to see the things that you do because I think you've been doing great things, successful for a long time. But yeah, I hope you can do that world championship if it comes here in the next year or two. As we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to say to the audience? And then how can people follow you, your team, anything like that? Any links that they can look at?
Right. And I've made it real easy to like look things up. Like I said, if you look up even on YouTube, Southern Utah Arm Wrestling, Jeff Kirby Arm Wrestling, as of recent, Utah Arm Wrestling, which is actually newer than Southern Utah Arm Wrestling, David Wilson has come up with a method where he puts a GoPro on the table and records the tournaments, and that's Utah Arm Wrestling, Facebook and YouTube channel. And most of our tournaments now are going on there because it's something I don't have to do, and he does a great job. But like I said, SouthernUtahArmWrestling.net. You can contact me at SouthernUtahArmWrestling@gmail.com. Same thing on YouTube. It's always Southern Utah Arm Wrestling. That's what my shirt says here, Southern Utah Arm Wrestling. So, so that's, if you just put it in, you will find me. My phone number is even online. I don't mind, people calling me. I'm always helpful. As helpful as I can be to help people out, because there are always people there for me, and I'm the same way. And like I said, really 99% of the people you meet in arm wrestling will be the same way. So if they'll point, if they don't have it going on, they'll point in the right direction somewhere that does. If you really want to do it, you will find it, and it's bigger now than it has been.
Well, thank you, Jeff. This has been wonderful. Let me keep you on the line here as we close this down just for a couple minutes. Okay. I'll chat with you afterwards. For everybody else out there, there you go. Arm wrestling. We had a chance to talk with Jeff, an awesome guy, great competitor. He's been doing this sport for a long time, and you have received some very good information about arm wrestling, which I think is one of the best sports out there that continues to need to grow so that we can see it more and more everywhere. Anyway, as we wrap up, I just want to say to everybody out there, stay safe and keep this in mind. There's a lot of strange and unexpected in our reality, so always keep your eyes, ears, and minds open, and until next time, stay safe.
Thank you for listening to High Strangeness. This was a glance at some of the strange that exists in our reality.